the creation of the land selection, the provision of support for the farmers, all of which I would hasten to advise both the Region 10 negotiators and the public at large. The government remains firmly committed to implementing.
Harris, sir, you talked about a national minimum wage and the establishment of a committee. Wasn't there a national minimum wage committee before? And while you're at it, sir, there is reportedly a problem with the Ministry of Finance with the IFMA system and the payroll and about the people who control it walking off the job. What really is going on there?
The national minimum wage that statutorily is subject that of implementation currently is not as all-embracing as intended now with the national minimum wage. The initiative that enjoys cabinet support is a national minimum wage that is truly national, cutting across all sectors, public, private, cooperative, unidentified, all sectors of the economy in Guyana. What currently exists is deliberate attention to certain sectors, particularly semi-skilled and unskilled, for which annually the government undertakes to do orders revising the minimum wage for those categories. This initiative is an improvement. It is the ultimate improvement that binds employers across the scale in their entirety, the whole class of employers, to subscribe to a minimum wage. No employee would earn less than, could earn more than, but no employee would earn less than. No employee, not just sectors, but no employees. And that's what the initiative that was embraced by Cabinet.
Sorry, quickly, you know, in the budget, you talk about this cutoff point, which gives an indication of a minimum wage. Mm-hmm. So how would this influence that new decision or new mandate that's being put in place?
The minimum wage in the budget, the minimum wage that is out in the public domain, are of two origins. One, there is the public service minimum wage. And the second one, the minimum wages to those sectors that I identified that are set by the Ministry of Labor in discharging its statutory obligations under labor legislation. So there are two types of minimum wages that coexist: public service minimum wage and the minimum wage for certain categories, employed, self-employed, the skilled and semi-skilled workers. This new minimum wage collapses. There will just be one minimum wage for the entire workforce in Guyana.
No, the finance.
Oh, sorry.
You have a problem in the Ministry of Finance. The IFMA system went down and the technicians apparently walked off the job. Public servants and some other categories have not been paid, although they were promised their payment, what, a week ago or so.
The Minister of Finance circulated to cabinet members a report identifying the difficulties with the IFMAS, and in that report indicated the resolution of the difficulties with the IFMAS was soon anticipated. and undertook to provide Cabinet with updates on the interventions that were put in place to get around the disruption on the electronic handling of payroll.
So what does it mean, sir, for the public servants who are awaiting payment?
I'm not aware, I might be under-informed, but I'm not aware as of yesterday that there are still public sector entities where payments of wages have not been made. I was told that, and this was before reading from ministers' undertaking, that this issue would soon be resolved. The 15th, I think, was the official payday in January. So I want to believe, I could stand corrected, that there are indeed entities in the public service that have yet to be paid for January, and I would then inquire and provide greater clarification to the media.
Christian, so reference the minimum wage, national minimum wage. Could you say where are the players for the new committee coming from, where they identified from, and is there a timeline, what's the timeline on getting this matter of
The Cabinet appointed a Cabinet committee that includes both Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Trade, Tourism and Industry, Ministry of Labor, of course. And I believe you would appreciate the need to compile all of the necessary interventions. We know what we are committed to. Here are the hurdles, here are the interventions that would have to be made. We spoke about it to get a competitive price, better than IDA, for you to get an award. If IDA offers these drugs at prices better than the bid submitted by the national entity, we are obligated on the basis of our pricing policy. This is a policy of great reverence, least responsive tender. So if IDA price is better, we are obligated to go with the IDA. Now, that is what makes this not sole sourcing. Sole sourcing essentially disregards a competitive component of the procurement. That is what sole sourcing does. You asked the question, when do we expect the appointment of the Public Procurement Commission? It's difficult to answer because it is the government of Guyana, as you said decades ago, that introduced that legislation, similar and at the same time with many of the other rights commissions, some of which are equally languishing. Human rights has not been appointed as yet. And one has to concede that some of the same difficulties in the democratization, in our reach out to put into the laws of Guyana and ensure that there was greater attention to inclusive government. We included the right of opposition to be involved in these processes. And maybe some would say, when it used to be just a presidential decision and a commission was appointed, now we are obligated to obtain agreements. And this is where the difficulty lies and where it persists. In this instance, at the level of the Parliament, and I want you to recall and not lose the significance when the PPP administration was the majority party in Parliament, we had difficulties during this period, the 7th, the 8th, the 9th Parliament. We had difficulties in concluding the establishment of the Public Procurement Commission. And if we had those difficulties when the PPP Civic was the majority party, I don't think it takes much, particularly in light of what has evolved in the 10th Parliament, to imagine it's going to be easier done. If we couldn't get it done then, under those circumstances that existed, I think it would be extraordinary efforts. And this is why I think the President and the leader of the opposition are both agreeing to reach out and, of course, to elevate the body politic above what appears to be the sum total of its contributions, quarreling and haggling holding. It was the point that I hope I wasn't too subtle in making in my opening statement, that indeed one can draw a line between the parliamentary interventions of the majority opposition and the minority government vis-a-vis matters that deal with development, economic development, national development of Guyana. I have said, and I keep saying, we are elderly. We get sick. Soon we will be handing over the 10th Parliament, the 11th Parliament, to new leaders, younger leaders, still belonging to the body politic. And if we do not elevate public perceptions about the body politic, on and beyond what is going on in Parliament as the sum total of the body politics, we are really going to be facing increasing difficulties in this country.
NIS, when you were out, the chairman of the NIS got involved with something and tendered a resignation, which was the GM, which was later withdrawn. I know that you intervened. That's true, I know he did. I heard that. I got good ears. What exactly happened? Why was she asked to apologize for a particular incident involving body Chevrolet or something that started causing disturbance?
We had resolved not necessarily to let sleeping dogs lie, but to put this behind us. But for the sake of the records, and again, a simplification of the issues, I would concede one, yes, I was involved, recognize that the Minister of Finance, who appoints the GM of the scheme, was equally, maybe even more involved than the chairman of the board, a board appointed also by the Minister of Finance. Consultative process, because of course a national minimum wage would impact both on labor and on the employers in the private sector and on government. it is because the recommendation came from the tripartite group that lent great fervor to Cabinet's adoption, Cabinet support. And I think it is important for us to recognize then that we would be expecting full buy-in from all of the players. But as you know, the old people say there's many a slip between tongue and teeth. And therefore, the compilation and all of the other steps that need to be taken would have to be done. So it's difficult for me to give a time frame that is done abstractly.
Yeah. Are we, any other questions on the opening presentation? All right, we may proceed to outside.
Dr. Luncheon, I'm seeking clarification on reports. You might say rumors.
On the force
Reports.
Reports.
Possible
Reports.
rumors.
Rumors if you want, on the possibility of Mr. Yo Mahathir being employed by the state. And possibility go invest, or we were even hearing tourism ministry. Can you confirm this or not? And secondly, with regards to yourself, given you have mentioned you will continue to give up your
Sure,
service,
yes.
right? Would you say whether you will be scaling back given the scope of your work? So many different boards and agencies.
I don't believe, and I'm going to deal with the second one because I could concede that there's much concern. I don't believe it is so much the scope that would be affected. I would hesitate to say it, but my practice over the last 2 decades was one where I really arrogated all components, policy making, implementation, decision, execution. I think in a friendly way people used to say luncheon like pot salt. I think I am willing to accept as I lay in my hospital bed and I saw the impact of my unexpected withdrawal from the machinery of state. I'm willing to concede that this is an untenable situation. And indeed, what I have planned, what I have planned and started to put in place is some adjustments. Still there, but maybe I wouldn't be so involved in execution, policy making, the compliance, but not the entirety of activities that I once engaged in. Hopefully, that would allow for better succession planning and a better distribution of responsibilities in the office of the president sector, particularly, and for government. I will conform with respect to what you ask about Mr. Mahathir. I will confirm that that must be a rumor.
Okay, any other questions?
Yes, reference the accident in the Mazruni yesterday. Do you have any reports, any updates, or is the research reviewing involved in research now?
Other than the minister inviting our attention in the middle of cabinet and leaving to, one would assume, lead the effort, recovery, and interventions, no, I don't have a subsequent report.
Sir, I want to take you down a quick road. There has been a lot of talk about Ministry of Health, Georgian Public Hospital, and distribution of drugs to the UGPC, and the brouhaha and all of that. One, when are we likely to see a procurement commission, bearing in mind that the bill was passed nearly a decade ago? And two, is the government going to continue with the policy of almost sole sourcing to one supplier for pharmaceuticals?
I'll deal with the second part that you describe as almost sole sourcing. I don't believe that you could convince the minister or cabinet, the procurement and tender and procurement tender and administration board, that this approach at procurement represents sole sourcing. Save and except you attempted to be dismissive about other aspects that differ from the rank and file, the more conventional sole sourcing, where procurement of drugs concerned. I want to reiterate that in the case of procurement of drugs, no drugs are procured through the agency of the Ministry of Health or the National Tender Board that does not at first and foremost relate to competitive pricing with international suppliers. So anytime, and I want to make this point, anytime a local provider is selected, that provider in his or her or the firm's submission had to be competitive vis-a-vis international providers. And the international providers which we have used are indeed international providers that actually provide drugs in the Ghana context and the rest of the developing world, IDA. So you have essentially over the last year, the board was investigating an issue that arose from a court ruling that the board couldn't accept an explanation offered by management, to wit, that the court dismissed the case against Body Sivraj on the urging of NIS. This is what the court was saying, this is what attorneys were saying, but this was what the scheme was protesting, was inaccurate. It is really a reflection of the efforts that this board went into to clarify this issue that generated the problem. There was a feeling that this matter could have been dealt with in one fell swoop, full disclosure, all of the information, instead of dragging out for months and for a number of statutory meetings. And on that basis, the issue arose that led to the boards really saying to management, this is unacceptable. And the rest of the story is now history. As I said to you, the interventions by both the Minister of Finance and the chairman of the board and the inclination and the agreement of the general manager to be reconciled with the dispensation has allowed us now to refocus on the scheme and those issues that are current, and to put behind us this blip that occurred on our horizon.
Okay, thank you very much.
Well done. Why the couple days actually make the get sharp, man. I like how you handle the thing.
I think Donald is here already, man. I must see fire. Fire somewhere. Yeah, very
Who else are you waiting on? All right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the media. I welcome you to our post-cabinet press briefing, and specifically Dr. Roger Luncheon, who is back with us after a brief absence from these briefings. This morning, Dr. Luncheon will bring us highlights from cabinet meeting, which was held on Tuesday, yesterday, and after his opening presentations, we will allow questions on his opening presentation, subsequently any other matter of topical interest. I'll now hand you over to Dr. Roger Luncheon.
Thank you, Kwame, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the media. I thank you for the warm greetings on my recovery and my return to office. On the agenda, acknowledgements, contracts, Parliament, Cabinet snippets, GOG Region 10 negotiations, diplomatic roundup, judges' compliment, national minimum wage, Commission on Rights of the Child, the report. Allow me to start with acknowledgements, merely to say it is important for me to acknowledge all of the efforts and the inputs that have been made by so many, near and far, in making my return, my recovery, and my return possible. Indeed, I can be excused, I hope I can be excused, for my simplification of this effort that I have observed was essentially because Big Brother was in Luncheon's corner. In that context, I just want to advise, I want to pledge that I would continue to expend, maybe even find greater energies, greater effort in serving the people of Guyana and to work on meeting their expectations. I needed to say that in the context of my recovery and return to work. Contracts. Cabinet at its meeting considered and offered its no objection to the following awards. In the Ministry of Tourism, Industry and Commerce, the procurement of one mobile test truck for the Guyana National Bureau of Standards. And that award is for $182,000 US, $182,000 US. In the sports sector, the construction of the synthetic track, the field facility bleachers. This is in phase 2 of the project, and lot 6 for the bleachers, $166 million Guyana dollars. 166 million Guyana dollars. Those were the awards for which Cabinet offered its no objections. Parliament. The sitting on Friday, the 25th of January, is the fourth sitting, and conventionally, the opposition business takes precedence over government business on fourth sittings. I have earlier pointed out that by their use of the one-seat majority in the House, the opposition has essentially overturned that convention, and it is now do as we dictate, fourth sitting or not. The Speaker, we regret, is complicit in this unparliamentary practice. The government continues to focus on Parliament and its role in charting the course of national development. At this sitting on the 25th, the opposition precedence has determined what goes on the order paper and what would attract the attention of MPs. The House is expected to continue deliberation on the Rohis exercise, the former president pension exercise, the past decade unexplained killing exercise, and all of these are opposition priorities being dealt with in the House. We now add to the list the latest, the commemoration, National Commemoration Commission. Undoubtedly of importance, these matters by the opposition, but they will prevent or at least delay the complete consideration of the House on pending, Government of Guyana pending and new matters that are of unquestionable importance to Guyana and to its development. The second reading and finalization of the pending bills, Firearm Amendment Bill, Local Authorities Election Bill, the Deeds Registry Amendment Bill. The government of Guyana plans to table a Justice Sector Amendment Bill on the sitting on the 25th that would allow for appeals of High Court and Full Court final decisions, final rulings, an issue that has been resolved similarly with enactment in most of the Commonwealth democracies. Cabinet snippets. Government of Guyana, Region 10 negotiations. Cabinet was provided with a status report on the ongoing negotiations by the Presidential Advisor on Governance, Mr. Shearer. Cabinet noted the focus by both parties to these negotiations on, one, reestablishing the functioning of the technical committee, and two, the appointment of chairperson to the economic committee. Lamentably, agreements on those two, on the appointment of those two chairpersons remain outstanding. Cabinet noted the deliberate misinformation that is being peddled in the Linden community and in sections of the media about about government's commitment to the agreement. For the record, Cabinet continues to reiterate its undertakings that are outlined in the formal agreement between the Government of Guyana and the Region 10 administration. Diplomatic roundup. Cabinet has approved the grant of its agreement for the appointment of His Excellency Mr. Victor Chan as the Honorary Consul of Guyana to Hong Kong. That is the Special Administrative Region of the People's Republic of China. Cabinet also granted its agreement for the appointment of Her Excellency Mrs. Aude Marit Wade as the non-resident ambassador, extraordinary and plenipotentiary of the Kingdom of Norway to the Republic of Guyana. Her Excellency Mrs. Aude Marie Wade will be resident in Brasilia, Brazil. Cabinet also approved the grant of its agreement to the appointment of His Excellency Mr. Luis Alberto Martino as the Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of the Republic of Argentina to the Republic of Guyana. National minimum wage. Based on discussions and the recommendation of the tripartite group, that is government, organized labor, and the private sector, at the Ministry of Labor, Labor Minister Dr. Nanda Gopal successfully sought Cabinet support for the establishment of a national minimum wage in Guyana. Cabinet was formally in support of the group's initiative and invited the minister to compile the comprehensive list of interventions necessary to give effect to the government's intentions. Cabinet approved a high-level team of Cabinet members to further this initiative, plan the necessary consultation process to ensure that full buy-in of all stakeholders in all the national economic sectors is obtained. Judges' complement. Cabinet at that 22nd of July meeting was advised by President Ramattar of his intention to statutorily increase the complement of judges in the judiciary to 20. The current complement of 12 judges was in place now for over 3 decades. More judges and accountable functioning of the judiciary, Cabinet reasoned, can contribute to the handling of the accumulating backlog of cases in the judiciary. Those CROC, Commission on Rights of the Child report. Cabinet was advised that the government of Guyana submitted its second to the fourth periodic report on its implementation of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. In April 2010, Guyana also submitted responses to follow-up issues in January 2013 and was reviewed on January the 15th, 2013 by the Committee on the Rights of the Child at the OHCHR. This is the Office of the High Commissioner on Human Rights in Geneva, Switzerland. Guyana's delegation was comprised of the Minister Webster, Human Services and Social Security, the Presidential Advisor on Governance, Ms. Gail Teixeira, and Ms. Alima Nazir Pandor, the chairperson of the National Commission on the Rights of the Child. The committee in Geneva noted and welcomed Guyana's commitment to the welfare of children, and the legislation on children seemed to be very good. And the committee noted, indeed, that there was some need for improvement in the practice, in particular in the areas of juvenile justice and the position on corporal punishment. At the delegation sat before the committee of the entire day, January the 15th, and was the first country to be reviewed at that 62nd session of the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child. The committee will make its concluding remarks and observations in the first week in February, and that document will guide the government of Guyana over the next 3 years of its compliance with treaty obligations. The proceedings in Geneva were publicly aired on the UN webcast, and a number of entities, NGOs, and others from Guyana were physically present in Geneva. Ladies and gentlemen, those are the matters I wanted to bring to your attention. We do have some time to, in addition to first responding to my opening statement, to allow for clarifications to be directed to the Cabinet Secretary on matters of your design that are, of course, topical. Thank you.
Yes, rather.
Yes,
I noted rather, sorry, before you.
Dr. Ranton, just a clarification on the Lynn and GOG agreement. Can you say whether there has been any change in the proposal or the names put forward for these committees, the outstanding appointment status?
What has evolved, if you would allow me, the initial stages of implementation had the creation of a secretariat that is still in place. The committee, the technical committee, the chairman and its 6 members had at least about 2 or 3 meetings, and then the chairman resigned. We never were able to agree on a chairperson for the economic committee. And so currently, neither the technical nor the Economic Committee are properly constituted and meeting. Since the resignation of the chairperson of the Technical Committee, both sides have spent considerable time exchanging nominees for the positions of chairperson on the two committees. As I said in my opening statement, those activities have not so far been fruitful. But what has evolved, and I think has generated some degree of optimism, is both sides have actually now identified no more than two non-objectionable nominees for both chairpersons, technical and for the economic. I am willing to concede that I don't have all of the necessary information, although I've been attending those meetings, as to who the two nominees for economic and the two nominees for the technical by the Region 10 and similarly for the government of Guyana. The committee also has outstanding its conclusion of additional elements in the agreement that was inked in 2012. And that includes the grant of the television license in the region,